Hello, my name is Adam, and I'm what you'd call a planner. For 43 years, I worked at the same engineering firm, saving every extra dollar, investing wisely, and building a life for my family. I believed in hard work, in responsibility, and in the idea that if you take care of your family, they'll take care of you. But on Father's Day, I learned a lesson that no amount of planning could have prepared me for. I received a gift from my daughter, a simple cardboard box. My wife, Helen, took one look at it and whispered, "Adam, don't open that." I leaned in for a closer look, and what I saw sent a chill down my spine. 10 minutes later, the police were at our door. You will not believe what was inside that box. Before I tell you the rest of this story, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. It all really started 6 days earlier, in our living room. The air was thick with a tension you could almost taste. "Dad, do you even understand that I need the money now, not after you die?" My daughter, Chloe, stood there, her face flushed. A shattered coffee mug lay on the floor, brown liquid seeping into the Persian rug Helen and I bought on our 20th anniversary. My hand was clenched around a set of inheritance documents, papers I'd spent years perfecting, now being used as a weapon against me. "Chloe, I am not an ATM," I said, my voice strained. "You will get your inheritance when the time comes." Her husband, Mark, was sprawled on our leather sofa, a smirk playing on his lips. "Come on, Adam, she's your only daughter. What's a few thousand to help us out?" A few thousand. The words echoed in my head. Just last month, it was a few thousand for his gambling debts. The month before that, a few thousand for Chloe's shopping sprees. The requests were a constant drumbeat in our lives, each one bolder than the last. "Help you out?" I asked, standing up slowly. My 66-year-old knees ached in protest. "I've helped you out for 3 straight years. My retirement fund is not your personal bank account." Helen appeared in the doorway, twisting a dish towel in her hands. "Please, everyone, just calm down. We can talk about this reasonably." "Reasonably?" Chloe spun around to face her mother. "He's sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars while we're drowning in debt." "Debt that you created," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Debt from your choices." I glanced at the mantel, where a family photo had been knocked face down. I couldn't tell if it fell during her tantrum or if someone had turned it over on purpose. The silver frame just reflected the ceiling light, a bright, empty glare. Mark leaned forward, his expression casual demeanor gone, replaced by a greedy intensity. "Look, old man, you're not getting any younger. Why not enjoy sharing your wealth while you're alive to see it appreciated?" Old man. The disrespect was a bitter pill to swallow. This from a man who couldn't hold a steady job for more than 6 months, who lived off my daughter's credit cards that I ended up paying off? "Because I worked 43 years for that money," I said, each word landing like a heavy stone. 43 years of 12-hour days, missed dinners, and canceled vacations, so you could have a comfortable childhood, Chloe, so the mother and I could finally retire with some dignity. "Dignity?" She let out a harsh, ugly laugh. "What's so dignified about hoarding money while your own daughter suffers?" "Suffers?" I looked at her designer handbag, her perfectly styled hair, Mark's brand new sneakers. Their version of suffering looked remarkably expensive. "Your suffering is self-inflicted," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. "Every crisis, every emergency, every single desperate plea for money, you created all of them." The room fell into a heavy silence. Helen stepped forward, her face pale. "Adam," she whispered, a plea in her voice. "Should what?" Chloe's voice cracked. "Should we keep enabling his selfishness? Should we keep pretending he's a loving father instead of a greedy old miser?" The words hit me harder than a physical blow. Greedy, selfish, unloving. 43 years of sacrifice, and this was my return on investment? Mark stood up then, his expression turning ugly. "You know what I think, Adam? I think you enjoy watching us struggle. It makes you feel powerful, doesn't it?" That was it. Something inside me snapped. "Get out," I said, the words coming from a deep, unfamiliar place in my chest. "Both of you, get out of my house." "Your house?" Chloe's eyes glittered with a dangerous light. "This house that Mom helped pay for? This house where I grew up? You can't just kick me out." "Watch me." But they didn't move. They just stood there like two predators who had cornered their prey, waiting for me to do what I always did: back down, apologize, and write another check to buy a few weeks of peace. But not this time. I walked to the front door and pulled it wide open. The cool evening air rushed in, carrying the scent of the honeysuckle bushes Helen had planted years ago. For a moment I could hear our neighbors laughing next door, a sound so normal it felt like it was from another world. "Chloe," I said, my back still to her, "take your husband and leave, and don't come back until you're ready to talk about your financial problems with solutions that don't involve my wallet." "You'll regret this," she hissed, grabbing her purse. "When you're old and sick and all alone, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember how you chose your money over your own family." Her heels clicked sharply on the hardwood floor. Mark paused at the door. "This isn't over, old man. Family doesn't abandon family." Then the door slammed shut, so hard the windows rattled in their frames. The silence that followed was heavier and more suffocating than all their shouting had been. After they stormed out, I just stood there at the front door, my hand still gripping the brass handle. Through the glass, I watched Chloe's car screech out of the driveway. Helen came up behind me, her touch soft on my arm. "Adam!" I turned, and the living room looked like a war zone. The coffee stain on the rug, the inheritance papers scattered like dead leaves, and that overturned photo frame winking at me from the mantel. 43 years, Helen. That's what I keep thinking about. 43 years. I remember working overtime shifts just so she could have the right clothes for high school, just so she could have a car for her 16th birthday. The wedding we couldn't really afford but paid for anyway because it was her dream. Helen started picking up the papers, her movement slow and deliberate. "She's struggling, Adam." "The gambling is her choice, Helen. The shopping, the lies, those are her choices." I walked over and righted the photo. It was Chloe at 5 years old, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, a huge, gap-toothed smile. When did that innocent child turn into this manipulative stranger? Remember when she wanted that giant dollhouse for Christmas? I worked double shifts for 2 months to buy it for her. Helen was silent. We both remember. We remember the ballet lessons, the summer camps, the expensive shoes because all her friends had them. Every sacrifice was made gladly because that's what you do for your child. And now, she was throwing things and calling me a miser because I wouldn't hand over my retirement fund? My phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was from. "Dad, I hope you're happy. The kids need new winter coats, but I guess your precious money is more important than your own grandchildren. Don't expect to see them anytime soon." The grandchildren, Emma and Jake, 8 and 6 years old. She knew that was the one weapon that could always bring me to my knees. She'd used it before, withholding them for a week or two whenever we didn't give in to her demands. I showed Helen the text. Her face just crumpled. "She wouldn't really keep them from us, would she?" she asked, but we both knew the answer.
"Adam, maybe we should just reconsider," she started. "No," I said, and the word came out like a shot. "No more, Helen. I will not be held hostage by my own grandchildren. I will not teach them that love is a transaction." I'd never been so firm with her in my life, and I could see the shock on her face. But something inside me had broken that night. The illusion I'd held on to for so long, that my sacrifice was appreciated, that my love was returned, had shattered just as completely as that coffee mug. That brings us to Father's Day morning, 6 days later. I was sitting on the porch, trying to find some sense of normalcy. The neighborhood was quiet, families were heading out for the day. Helen and I hadn't heard a peep from Chloe, which was unusual. The silence felt calculated, like the quiet before a storm. Then a delivery truck pulled up. The driver handed me a medium-sized box, wished me a happy Father's Day, and left. There was no return address. I brought it inside and set it on the coffee table. It was light, maybe only a couple of pounds. "Who's it from?" Helen asked, coming in from the kitchen. "No idea," I said. She leaned in closer, her eyes scanning the box. She's always been more cautious than me. "Adam," she said, her voice suddenly low and tense, "don't open it." "Why not?" She pointed to the side of the box. "Can't you see? There are holes, tiny holes for breathing. Whatever is in there is alive." My blood ran cold. I looked closer, and she was right. Small, precise punctures in the cardboard. And then we heard it. A faint rustling sound from inside. It stopped, then started again. A soft, dry, shuffling noise. Helen grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I could only nod. And then came another sound, a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. A low, distinct hiss. "Call someone," Helen breathed, her eyes wide with fear. "Call someone now." My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. "We have a suspicious package," I stammered into the phone. "It was delivered this morning, no return address, and there's something alive inside. It's hissing." The dispatcher was calm, professional. "Sir, I'm sending officers to your location. Do not touch the package. Can you move to another room?" We backed away slowly, our eyes glued to the coffee table. 10 minutes, he said. 10 minutes felt like a lifetime. "Who would do this, Adam?" Helen whispered. "The timing, the anonymous delivery, the sheer cruelty of it." The answer was right there, hanging in the air between us, too horrible to say out loud. But we both knew. This wasn't a gift. This was a message. And as another louder hiss came from the box, I knew my daughter had just escalated things to a level I never could have imagined. The 10 minutes until the police arrived felt like 10 hours. Every creak of the house, every rustle from the box on the coffee table sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me. Helen and I stood huddled by the kitchen doorway, as far from the living room as we could get without leaving the house, just as the dispatcher had instructed. The hissing would stop for a minute, luring us into a false sense of calm, and then it would start again. A dry, menacing sound that promised something terrible. When the doorbell finally rang, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I opened it to find a tall, serious-looking officer. His name tag read T. Reeves. "Mr. Carr?" he asked. "We received your call about a suspicious package." "Yes, thank you for coming so quickly," I said, my voice hoarse. We led him into the living room. He pulled on a pair of latex gloves and approached the box cautiously. "You heard hissing?" he asked. "Yes," Helen confirmed, her voice trembling. "Like a snake." Officer Reeves nodded grimly. "I've handled calls like this before. I'm calling animal control. They have the proper equipment for safe removal." While he was on his radio, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you have any idea who might have sent this to you?" I hesitated. Part of me, the father in me, wanted to protect Chloe, even now, but another part, the part that was terrified and angry, knew this had to stop. "We had a family disagreement recently." He looked at me, his gaze sharp. "Disagreements are one thing, Mr. Carr. Sending a live animal through the mail is a federal offense. This took planning." He was right. And as he spoke, a memory surfaced, so sharp and clear it felt like a punch to the gut. The credit card statement from last month. I let Chloe use my cart for emergencies. There was a charge on it about 3 weeks ago for $127.50. The name of the store was Reptile Palace. At the time, I'd assumed it was a toy for one of the grandkids. Now the name felt sinister. "Mr. Carr, are you all right?" the officer asked. "I'm fine," I lied. But I wasn't. The pieces were clicking into place. The argument, the timing, the charge on my credit card. My daughter had sent me a snake. Soon a white van from animal control pulled up. A man named Mike Johnson came in with a long metal grabber and a secure container. He worked with a calm professionalism that was strangely comforting. Within minutes, he had opened the box and safely extracted a 3-foot-long corn snake. Non-venomous, but definitely enough to give someone a good scare. Beautiful snake. Shame someone would use it like this. After they had both left, the house was quiet again, but the peace was gone. The living room felt violated. Helen started cleaning the kitchen, her usual response to stress. I just stood there, watching our neighbors live out their normal Father's Day. My phone felt like a lead weight in my hand, but I knew I had to call her. I had to hear her voice. She answered on the second ring, her tone artificially bright. "Dad, happy Father's Day! How's it going?" I kept my voice as level as I could. "It's been an interesting morning, Chloe. You wouldn't happen to know anything about a strange Father's Day gift?" "No, Dad, what happened?" And then I heard it. In the background, I heard Mark, her husband, let out a quiet laugh. It wasn't a laugh of surprise. It was a snicker. A low, satisfied sound from someone who thought they'd just pulled off the perfect cruel prank. That was it. That was the moment all doubt evaporated. All my protective fatherly instincts, all my excuses for her behavior, they all vanished with that one simple sound. My daughter had sent me a snake, and her husband thought it was funny. "Just some confusion with the delivery," I said, my voice cold and steady now. "Nothing important. Enjoy your Sunday, Chloe." I hung up before she could say another word. Helen looked at me, her eyes full of questions. "What is it?" "He laughed," I said. When she asked what happened, Mark laughed in the background. She didn't need any more explanation. She saw the look on my face, the shift from fear and confusion to something hard and resolute. "What are you going to do, Adam?" she asked. I looked from my phone to my home office, where my computer sat. The computer that held the keys to every financial lifeline I had ever extended to my daughter. "I'm going to teach her about consequences," I said. And for the first time in a very long time, I knew exactly what I had to do. That evening, I sat in my office, the door closed. The quiet hum of the computer was the only sound. For years, this room had been where I managed our family's future, but it had also become the command center for bailing out Chloe from her latest self-made disaster. On my desk was a portfolio filled with evidence of my enabling. Bank statements showing transfers for her rent, credit card bills I'd paid off, canceled checks for her emergencies. I logged into my online banking portal. The passwords felt different tonight, not just keys to my accounts, but tools of liberation. First, I went to the credit card account, the one with the Reptile Palace charge. Chloe was listed as an authorized user, a privilege I'd given her in college. I navigated to the Manage Users page. The system asked me a security question. What was your childhood pet's name? Sparky. A simple answer to undo a 20-year-old mistake. A button on the screen read, Remove Authorized User. I hovered the mouse over it for a second, a silent acknowledgement of the shift that was happening. Then I clicked, User Access Revoked. Next, the automatic payments, the monthly transfer that covered her rent, the car insurance premium, the gym membership she swore was essential for her mental health. One by one, I went down the list, clicking Cancel. Each click felt like severing a rope that had been pulling me down for years. I wasn't just cutting off funds. I was cutting off the dysfunction. I was taking back control of my own life. I changed all my PINs and passwords. I reviewed every account, closing loopholes I hadn't even realized existed. For 30 minutes, I worked with methodical precision. When I was finished, I leaned back in my chair. The house was quiet. Outside my window, the neighborhood was settling in for the night. I felt a sense of calm I hadn't realized was missing for so long. The constant, low-grade anxiety of waiting for the next crisis call was gone. Tomorrow morning, Chloe would wake up to a new reality. Her financial safety net, the one she had taken for granted and abused for decades, would be gone. For the first time, the consequences of her actions would be entirely her own. I knew my phone would ring, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to answer it. The next morning, the phone rang at exactly 8:15 a.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table, enjoying a cup of coffee. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Good morning, Chloe." "Dad, what have you done?" Her voice was shrill with panic. "My card was just declined at the grocery store. The payment for my car insurance bounced. What is happening?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Chloe, I know you sent me that Father's Day gift." A beat of silence. Then pure fury. "You've lost your mind. How could you do this to me?" Notice, she didn't deny it. She didn't ask what I was talking about. She went straight to accusing me. "I didn't do anything, Chloe," I said calmly. "I simply stopped paying for your irresponsibility." "You can't just cut me off. I have bills. I have responsibilities." Responsibilities. I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. Yes, like the responsibility to not terrorize your own parents. "Dad, please," she begged, her tone shifting to the desperate sob story that always worked. "Mark and I are struggling." "Your struggles are not my responsibility anymore," I said. "Your choices led you here. Your choice to send that package. Your choice to live beyond your means. Your choices will determine what happens next." "Fine," she screeched, all pretense of sadness gone. "Don't expect to see your grandchildren again. Emma and Jake won't even remember your name by the time you change your mind." This was her trump card, the threat that had always brought me to heel. But the man who was afraid of that threat no longer existed. "Chloe," I said, my voice firm and clear, "those threats stopped working yesterday morning." The silence on the other end was profound. I could almost hear the gears in her head grinding, trying to process why her ultimate weapon had just misfired. Finally, she whispered, "I can't believe you're doing this to me." "One little prank and you completely lose your mind," she muttered. And there it was. An admission. Not an apology, but an admission wrapped in blame. A prank involving a live animal isn't little, Chloe, and a father cutting off financial support after 30 years of enabling isn't losing his mind, it's finally finding it. Her voice turned to ice. "This isn't over, old man. We'll see about that." And she hung up. I set the phone down. Helen was watching me with a look of awe on her face. "She's coming here, isn't she?" she said. "Yes, I imagine she is." Less than an hour later, a car roared into our driveway. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I opened it to find Chloe and Mark on my doorstep. "We need to talk," Chloe demanded, trying to push past me. I stood my ground. "We already talked. I was very clear." "Clear? You were insane," she yelled. Peter stepped forward, trying to use his size to intimidate me. "Look, old man, maybe you should reconsider. The kids need things." "The kids whose mother uses them as bargaining chips?" I shot back. "Fine," Chloe screamed. "You'll never see them again. They'll grow up knowing their grandfather chose money over them." I looked her straight in the eye. "Chloe," I said quietly, "that's not a threat anymore. That's a blessing." The shock on their faces was absolute. They had never seen this version of me. This was a man they couldn't manipulate. Mark's face darkened. "We know where you live, old man," he said, his voice a low growl. "We know your routine. You might want to think about that." I didn't even flinch. "Are you threatening me, Mark? Because if you are, this conversation is no longer a family matter. It's a police matter." They stared at me, their faces a mixture of fury and disbelief. They finally realized that the bank was closed. The game was over. They had lost. Without another word, they turned and stormed back to their car, leaving me and Helen standing in the doorway of our quiet, peaceful home. That afternoon, I called our lawyer, Eleanor Vance. I explained everything. The years of financial strain, the snake, the threats. She listened patiently. "Adam," she said, "this is harassment and intimidation. We need to take firm legal steps to protect you and Helen." Over the next few days, we did just that. First, we restructured my will. The money that was supposed to go to Chloe would now be placed in a tightly controlled educational trust for Emma and Jake. The funds could only be used for legitimate school expenses, managed by a neutral third party. Chloe and Mark would never be able to touch a single penny of it. This wasn't about punishing the grandkids. It was about protecting their future from their parents' greed. A week later, Eleanor called. "Adam, it's done." They were served with the restraining order and the notification about the will this afternoon. A profound sense of relief washed over me. It was finished. The threats were toothless. The manipulation was powerless. We were safe. The quiet that settled over our lives in the following weeks was something I hadn't realized how much I missed. No crisis calls, no panicked texts, just peace. Helen and I started enjoying our retirement for the first time. We traveled a little, worked in the garden, and reconnected in a way we hadn't been able to in years, free from the constant shadow of our daughter's problems. I learned a painful but powerful lesson. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is to say no. It's not about being greedy or selfish. It's about refusing to enable destructive behavior. It's about teaching the hard lesson of consequences. I had to let go of the daughter I wish I had and deal with the one I actually had. By setting legal and financial boundaries, I didn't just reclaim my life and my peace of mind. I gave her the only thing that could ever truly help her, the opportunity to finally grow up. My name is Adam, and I finally learned that true fatherhood isn't about giving your children everything they want, it's about giving them what they need, even if that means giving them nothing at all.